Good evening and welcome, everybody. I'm seeing some lovely faces that I know. I'm seeing some new faces that I don't know. Seen some faces from Tuesday night. Some people are going to start talking about us having an affair because you on Zoom with Cindy again tonight. But really, it's lovely, lovely to see you all. So everybody, while other people are joining, and Shaka, while I just do an introduction, if you don't mind, just watching the what do you call that? The waiting room. That's it. So everybody, a guide to thriving as an empath as a highly sensitive person. Oh my goodness. We often as children didn't know why, how, or why. But tonight, Shaka, a dynamic and passionate guide in the world of healing and self-discovery with over 15 years of experience as a psychic, a tarot reader, a yoga teacher, a Reiki master, a holistic masseur. Shaka is going to bring us a wealth of knowledge and a unique perspective from her point of view. Shaka's been a student at the school since 2021 and has recently been tutoring on our foundation in psychic development. But Shaka was talking to me the other day and just saying to me, you know, Cindy, the real gift that I've had from my spiritual journey is the gift of being aware that I'm a highly sensitive person. The gift of being an empath. And I just said, wow, wouldn't you like to share that with the community? And maybe, you know, we do energy management, but just taking it from a slightly different perspective of this highly, highly sensitive person. And she's going to take you through various things tonight, which I'm sure if you're here tonight, you're going to identify with. You're going to go, oh, that's me. I can relate to that. And then also maybe give us a few tools that we can use to do that, to how to handle it, how to live our best lives. So, yeah, that's what tonight is all about. So, Shaka, welcome. And if you could just put up the slides of what we're going to go through tonight, and I'll just introduce those.
Okay, so
slideshow, there we go, perfect. So navigating the world as an empath or a highly sensitive person. So the format and housekeeping for tonight will be as follows. We're busy doing introductions and Shaka will introduce herself to you in a minute. We're going to do a beautiful grounding meditation to start with. She's going to do what is the main talk or the masterclass. We'll then just do a little meditation. We will then do questions and answers and closing. So before we even start, what I'd like to just introduce you to is Shaka is going to be doing a course, which we will talk about around this later on. But just so that you guys are aware, we have got a special on, and if you want to do this course, I suggest you book before Friday. There's no have to. You're going to get a lot out of tonight, but just to put it out there at the beginning of the masterclass, so you have the information. You will also receive this information later when you get the recording tomorrow. So, but you haven't got long to make a decision. So I'm just going to pop that in the chat. And Shaka, I'm going to hand over to you, but I know I'm going to butt in a lot tonight because this is also very close to my heart. Just saying, be prepared.
Okay. No, you go ahead and butt in as you need, Cindy. That's fine. Thank you so much for that introduction. And just to say welcome, everyone. Welcome in. Thank you for joining this evening. Well, it's this afternoon, actually. So wherever you are in the world, welcome in and thanks for joining. So yeah, like Cindy said, just a little bit more about me. I only really discovered that I was an empath in the last couple of years, really. And And I feel like it was really a big missing link of self-understanding of myself. And since knowing, I feel like I've gained so many tools and like so much more understanding of how to thrive. And I think up until that point, you know, I've been moving through the world in such a way and not really fully understanding myself. So it's a subject that I'm incredibly passionate about and something that's really personal. And so I'm really pleased, first of all, to be doing this masterclass, and then also to be offering the 8-week course with the school, which will start in September, which I'll talk a little bit more about at the end of the talk, which I can go into a few more details and kind of let you know a bit more about. But, you know, this is something that I think has been building for a while. So yeah, and I'm open to questions, so do feel free to put questions in the chat throughout the talk, and also put your hands up if you have any questions as we're going through the talk. So without any further ado, should we just start by just getting into our bodies? We'll just start with a nice grounding meditation. So wherever you are, let's just take a moment to uncross our legs. If you can, and you have your feet, maybe just place them on the floor. And if you're seated somewhere, just allow yourself to drop your sitting bones down, allow yourself to get a bit heavy in your seat. And if you have a chair that has a back, then maybe lean back, allow your back to be supported. And if you're comfortable to, close the eyes, or if you prefer, just lower your gaze. And so first, just take a moment just to locate yourself in space, in time. So just taking in your environment with your senses. So first start with sound. Just maybe noticing what you can hear. Tuning in near and far. Noticing maybe what you can smell. Or any sensations on your skin, any breeze, the temperature. Just observing, noticing, taking it in. You may notice as you do this, your body naturally will start to settle, the mind start to settle. Just allowing ourselves to leave behind the rest of the day. And just allow ourselves to be fully present with all of the knowledge and information that we're going to take in today. And so maybe just taking a few breaths. So just taking your attention to your breath. You maybe want to take a nice deep inhale and really slow down your exhale. And again, just letting the shoulders drop, letting the hips ground, and again, just allowing yourself to arrive into your body, into this moment, into this session. And then just keeping the eyes closed, I'm just going to invite you to just stroke your right hand down your left arm, and stroke your left arm down your right arm, left hand down your right arm. And then just simultaneous doing both sides, but just stroking down the arms one at a time, nice and slow. And again, just allowing yourself to get into your body, feeling of touch. And then you can stroke the hands down the chest, and down the front side of the body. And just again, allowing yourself to ground and settle, staying with that centered breath. And then you can just move down the legs. So you don't have to go all the way down to the feet, but maybe just stroking down the thighs. And again, just allowing ourselves to come into our bodies and into this present moment. And maybe just take a moment there and just notice anything, holding all that's present for you in this moment with compassion, and non-judgment. And then when you're ready, you can drop your chin down and then open your eyes, raise your head, and bring your attention back into the space, and then we'll begin. So, thank you, everyone, and hopefully it's allowed us to just bring some calm and presence and grounding as we begin. So, the first place we'll start. So I'm just going to throw lots of information at you now. And like I said, do feel free to ask questions as we go along. So first things first, where we start, what is an empath? And I think, well, most of you here will have a sense of what an empath is, and will be asking yourself a question, am I an empath? And that's shorthand also for a highly sensitive person. So you can, you know, some people call themselves HSPs, highly sensitive person, but shorthand will just say empath. And, you know, an empath, as we know, is ultimately somebody who is able to really be very, well, I call porous is what I call an empath. So it means that your energy is very open, and it means that you're very, very porous to your environment. And that means your people, animals, nature, just your whole environment, whatever's happening in that space. As an empath, your energy field's quite open, and it means that you're very porous to what's happening around you. And so this means that empaths can feel what other people are feeling, have a sense of what other people's internal worlds are, have a very deep and active internal world themselves, and have profound feeling responses to their environment. Yeah, that maybe other people, you know, if you're someone who's, you know, you've been told, well, you're too sensitive, you know, where you really feel things, and someone says, well, that's very sensitive, or that's the whole point. Empaths are very, very sensitive, so can have actually profound feeling responses to things in their environment that maybe other people may think aren't, like, that's not a big deal, you know. And also highly attuned. So sometimes, you know, there's a dial here with the highly attuned, because that can be hyper vigilant or hyper aware. So this means like kind of being aware of, you know, what other people are doing, you know, just having an awareness of how people are feeling in the space, regardless if you're even talking to them. I don't know if anyone else can relate, but I definitely know I could be in a restaurant with my friends, having a dinner and a conversation with my friends, and I will be incredibly aware of what everyone else is doing around me. Someone could drop their purse and I'm thinking, oh, I've got to go and tend to that, you know what I mean, or something like that. So just having that, just highly attuned to what everybody else is doing, and aware of people's feeling states as well. You know, is that person angry? Are they happy? Are they sad? So it can, you know, the dial can go into hypervigilance, but when it's in its positive state, it's just being highly attuned to the environment around you. And also, actually, I haven't put it here, and but it will be in the course. There are different kinds of empaths. So there's different kinds of empaths who have different senses, and who generally have this slightly different angles on that as well. So some empaths are more attuned emotionally. Some empaths are more attuned to animals. Some empaths are more attuned spiritually. So maybe like more spiritual gifts, i.e. more psychic. Others may be more emotional, i.e., you know, maybe more about, you know, working in kind of therapy, like as therapists, for example, and et cetera, et cetera. So there's slightly different, you know, some empaths will kind of have maybe a kind of, what would you say, like a kind of specialist, a kind of specialist gift. So yeah. So what does that mean? You know, what does that mean? It means that empaths ultimately move around in the world in a way that I call porous, like I said. They're constantly absorbing what's around them, whether they're aware of that or not. And there's an automatic attunement and sensitivity to other people, animals, and places. And this has both positives and negative implications. So, you know, you'll hear, you know, other people talk about empaths. It can be quite difficult to move in the world like that. But there actually are incredible positives and there's some challenges. And so I have come to the conclusion that once there's that awareness of where are your challenges and where are the positives, then you can start to be more proactive about, you know, how you're showing up in the world, how to look after yourself and your well-being, etc. So let's look at the challenges first. So first thing is to get this out the way. And I think, you know, often, and I would be really interested with everybody here, if any of you have had these experiences, please do share them in the chat. I know Cindy's looking at the chat, so yeah, please do feel free to share if any of this resonates. So, you know, when we talk about, first of all, you know, taking on the thoughts and energy and mannerisms of other people, you know, this can be a good thing, but it can also be incredibly challenging if those mannerisms and thoughts and energies are negative. So, you know, it means that, you know, if there are negative things happening around you, regardless of whether they are personally affecting you, empaths can take that on. So that means, you know, even if you watch a film and there's violence, that could affect you. You know, watching the news, that could affect you. If somebody else around you is in distress, that can affect you, you know? What's that? Oh, was that Cindy?
Telephone.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Electromagnetic. Oh, wow. It's a cool phone, that is. Yeah. So it's, you know, really being, you know, you've got to be aware that when you're taking that in, when you're open and so porous, it means you're open for the good and also the bad. Yeah. Another really important thing to know is a challenge is for empaths the inability to locate what's theirs and what's others. So it's knowing what belongs to you, what's your own stuff, because we all carry our own stuff. You know, we all have our own personal, you know, things that we carry. And the challenge for empaths is knowing what's theirs and then actually what belongs to other people and what they've absorbed. So this can be incredibly challenging. This is one of the key tools, and we will look at this a bit more when we look at key tools. That's a very key thing to master if you want to thrive as an empath, yeah, is knowing what's yours, because then you can hold what's others, but also with the knowledge that it's not yours, and then you have the power to give that back, or give that back where you need to, yeah, and not hold that and carry that, because that's where it can get very heavy for empaths, yeah. And this relates to the second or the third in this, which is, you know, low social battery. So you'll often hear people talk about empaths, you know, crowds are not so good. That can be true. It's not always true. It can be true, but it's more just generally around social busyness. So can often feel drained in the company of others. And again, because you're taking on people's energy without realizing, so it doesn't matter. And constantly being hyper aware and hyper vigilant is, you know, that is that's holding a lot of energy within yourself. Yeah. So that's why social interactions actually, and personally, actually, I find bigger crowds actually fine for me. So for me, I find it more like if it's a smaller group, i.e. about, you know, like 6 people, like if I'm going out for dinner with a group, that I find really difficult actually. But a big crowd like carnival, for example, I love. So I don't understand that, so I can't explain that for myself, but again, it's slightly different, but it's still this awareness that when in the social setting, I'm definitely, you know, taking on that energy, you know. Also empaths' tendency towards codependency. Yeah, because there's such a porousness, such a care for others, this can come at a cost to themselves, which is, you know, seeking care and connection, even when it might not be so good for the empath themselves. So sometimes this can lead into codependent relationships, which, you know, segues us nicely into the next challenge, which is difficulty in setting boundaries. Again, when we look at, you know, how to thrive, this is massive for an empath, because again, when your energy is so open, it's so porous, there's so much energy coming and going in your auric field. You have to learn how to set that boundary, how to set that barrier around you, so that you are again connected to your own energy and not just being an open gate for others' energy as well. Yeah, it's massive. And again, the capacity to self-abandon without realizing. So empaths, this is, in relationships, can often just put other people before themselves to their cost without realizing. So, empaths will often feel very drained, energetically tired, maybe even resentful, and not realizing that actually it's because there's an overgiving at a cost to oneself. And empaths often will feel that they're obligated to do that, which is why it's hard to set boundaries as well, because there's a sense of obligation to look after others, because you feel what others are feeling, you see or know what other people's are feeling, and then empaths have a tendency to just take that on, without even being asked, really, and that obviously speaks to putting the needs of others before their own, which is obviously at risk of burnout, because once you're doing all of this, it's carrying a lot, carrying a lot for everybody, for the world, for everything, holding it all. And that is just not sustainable energetically, So, and this is the thing, and this is why once we're aware, we can start to be proactive, we can take those actions, to change these patterns. But often, you might just be a sensitive person, and maybe you've been told all your life you're too sensitive, so you're trying to move in the world like a quote unquote normal person, when actually you're holding without even realizing. So this can lead to burnout, feeling tired, just not having motivation, not having energy, and these kinds of things, and sometimes not even knowing why. That's another thing with, you can suddenly have an energy crash and not know why. Like suddenly, bam, I just can't even, what X, Y, Z, just no energy whatsoever. And often that is a sign that you've had some kind of energetic social interaction that has been absorbed, that wasn't good.
We've already had, sorry, just do the last one, and then I have got a couple of questions before we jump onto the next section.
Sure, of course. And then obviously conflict averse. So that's, like I said, that could be watching, a scary film. It could be, watching the news. For me, it's like boxing. I can't watch boxing, MMA, forget it. Like, absolutely not. That's never going to happen. That would disturb me greatly. So there's things that we might just not be able to consume without having an adverse effect. So yeah, just being mindful of that, and jump in with those questions, Cindy, please.
So what a really good question is an empath born that way, or can it be created by circumstance?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I am inclined to think that empaths are born, but invariably will have life experiences that will then continue to shape that reality. So no, I don't think empaths are created. I think you can work on your sensitivity. I think we can become more sensitive and more aware, more attuned to others and our environments. But I think ultimately, often I think it's something that you're born with.
Yeah, I would concur, but I do believe certain traumas would then relate you to becoming more and more sensitive because of the trauma, and you becoming, losing your boundaries, losing that through trauma. So I think it's a bit of both. I think it might develop.
And maybe that's where we talk about the difference between an empath and a highly sensitive person, because maybe a highly sensitive person has gone on a journey to become highly sensitive, whereas I think empaths are generally like born. And I think you're right, because actually, and I will talk about that a little bit more, when we talk about like tools for thriving, which is the relationship between being highly sensitive and trauma, because there definitely is a relationship there as well.
Thank you. Jody goes on to say that, and you might cover this later, so for long periods of time, how do I protect my energy for long enough so that I'm not exhausted after a few hours? So she goes out and it feels like Jody's like robust for the first 2 hours. Does she have to go home after a couple of hours, or are there ways to maintain one's energy?
Yeah, this is a really good question. I mean, it depends what it is, right? Because if it's a social activity, then you have a little bit more control. You know, if you've got your friends and you say, hey, I'm coming out for 2 hours, that's it. I'm in bed by night. You know, you've got a bit more control. If this is work and, you know, you've got to be at work all day, there's less of a choice around that. So I think that depends what the thing is, what the activity is, and the obligation to do the activity. I'm generally of the mind that you want to be able to take full control of your day, your schedule, your life. I really am a big believer. If you don't want to do it, don't do it. It's really as simple as that. That's another thing about the boundaries, is like that's dropping the obligations, you know, because that's part of the issue, you know, and that's part of managing one's energy, is being able to know what I can do, what I can't do, what's good for me and what isn't. And maybe you do take those days where you're like, okay, today I'm going to just, you know, go all in and know that I'm maybe going to pay a price. And maybe you feel that, and maybe you can do that once in a while, but on a whole, you've got to know yourself and your energy. And there are practices you can do to protect your energy, as in like, you know, bathing yourself in light, putting a protective energy around you, carrying certain crystals, you know, cleansing your space, doing certain things for yourself in preparation. But also, I think in close relationships, it's very, very difficult for an empath to just not be porous. And so it's just being aware of what people, what situations, what activities do that for you. And then it's a choice. You know, I personally would be like, no, it doesn't feel good, I'm not doing it. But if you feel like you have to, then, you know, maybe you can start to set those boundaries and say, I'm only going to do that at you know, certain times a month or a year, or, you know, certain times, you know, for a certain amount of time, you know.
So
yeah,
Shaka, we have someone who works in a hospital, and Lorraine talks about she feels drained a lot of the time because she's giving in herself. She's in a caregiver situation, and she can feel so much about the people she's dealing with, which means she can relate to all those categories, but she's learning to be boundary to do that. And I'm not sure if you want to comment, because there are people whose basic needs are met by doing service jobs, because I think what's really interesting about this conversation is often empaths are really good at serving others because they know what they're feeling. They know how to anticipate people's needs.
Absolutely.
And that's the challenge.
Absolutely. And we're going to come to that as well. Absolutely. And so this is, you know, when we talk about managing energy, it means that if that, you know, again, it's hard with work. It's hard, right? Because, you know, we all have to earn a living, and we all have, you know, and we're passionate about what we do. There's absolutely no way that you could be working in a hospital if you didn't genuinely care about people. And that's genuine. And I think that's often why empaths overgive, because we care. We really want to help people, and we can see what they need, and we really want to meet them. And so for me, intuitively, I feel like, Lorraine, I feel like maybe it's actually not so much the work, but it's actually the outside of work. Are we doing enough to fill our own cup? Is there things that we're doing when we're not at work actually that can feed our energy and pour into us? And I feel like it's doing more of that, so that you're building that muscle and that capacity, because I feel the sense that I feel like there's a desire to do this. I think you get a lot from that, but actually I think it's more just a case that there's an imbalance of giving and not receiving. And I think maybe if you get that balance, then I think you could come back into enjoyment in that place of that giving comes from that place. Which I feel is like close to your heart and your purpose. Yeah.
Shaka, I've got one more example. I was just thinking about the challenges of an empath. So when your love relationship is going well, there's this beautiful expansion. But when your love relationship starts getting a bit ropey or a bit difficult or a bit challenging, you know, because this is someone who you allow into your intimate space and whatever. And so then the exchange can become quite challenging, and how you protect that energy. It's an observation. You don't need to, you know, we don't need to dive into it, but I think it's something one needs to be aware of if you are an empath or a highly sensitive person.
I mean, I would say this is generally around any close relationships. You know, that could be family, good friends, lovers, partners, you know, spouses. This is what, you know, and it's impossible. Like, I think actually, you know, I've come to the conclusion that actually it's impossible actually to stop yourself, because that's part of what makes you care about people, right? Is you are open, you do care. So I'm of the opinion that you take the hit there, you know, that's part of where you build your resilience around having the capacity for feeling hurt, is what I want to say. Because I think people hurt us unintentionally. There's people that hurt us intentionally. That's where we need to set boundaries. And then there's people that hurt us unintentionally because we're highly sensitive. And I think that's just where we also need to build resilience. You know, and close relationships and boundaries and understanding, because there are some relationships that are not healthy for us. And, you know, we do need to be very, you know, disciplined about that and what's good for us and what isn't. And then there are just normal relational dynamics that are part of life, and it's give and take. And, you know, and that's, you know, and it's just, and that's knowing the difference, and knowing the difference is knowing yourself.
And good communication.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Okay. Well, so we've looked at the challenges. So now let's look at some of the positives. Let's have a quick look at these reflections. So yeah, the most important, it's important to get the challenges out the way, because obviously most people associate these with being an empath. So often, you know, I think it does have some negative connotations. And I think the reason why I wanted to do this masterclass was to say, actually, no, this is about taking your power back. Just because empaths are highly sensitive, it doesn't mean that you're weak or you're powerless. Actually, it's actually, no, yes, we have these are the challenges, but actually there's ways to manage yourself. And so, you know, that's when we can be proactive and start to improve our well-being. And it absolutely does, just because we face these challenges absolutely does not mean that we cannot thrive. And there are ways to, you know, make sure that these things impact you less. So benefits of being an empath. It's an incredible gift. It's an incredible gift to the world, right? You know, you are able to hold such deep amount of feeling for yourself, for your own world, and then for others. This is a beautiful, beautiful thing in the world, right? So, you know, it means to be in touch with life and existence in meaningful and profound ways. You know, I think the issue in this moment, in this paradigm, we call it the industrial postmodern paradigm, whatever you want to call it, is that, you know, empaths have always existed, but I think in this current paradigm as it is, what the gifts that the empaths brings to the world are little, you know, are little honored or received or valued, you know. And so I think this is also part of the challenge of an empath, right? Because not only are you feeling very sensitive and porous, but then also this can feed into feelings of loneliness around this idea that I should be able to spend 5 hours with my family on a Sunday after and not come back feeling utterly drained. You know, I should be able to do that thing and do it over and over and over again without, you know, and it's like, well, no, you know, sometimes for empaths, it's like, well, no, we can't do that, you know. And actually, when we start to understand that and then hone our gifts, well, then our gifts become more profound and powerful in the world. And And so I think this paradigm, obviously, you know, it valors many things that are very antithetical to being an empath, to sensitivity, to care, you know. So I think this you know, creates a double impact, you know, for challenges for empaths. But you know, that absolutely, like the gift of sensitivity, of kindness, of care, of sense, this is beautiful, and we must remember to center it and celebrate it, because we need more of that in the world. You know, we're heading for what we call a meta crisis. Yeah, I don't want to get into politics now, but you know, I think we're all aware that we're in this moment in history where, you know, there's a few, you know, sort of, you know, things lining up on the horizon that are all creating what could be a meta crisis for humanity and existence, a life on Earth. So actually, this is a really important time historically for empaths to really come into their gifts and bring that into the world, because the world needs healing and it needs more care and sensitivity and attunement. You know, this is very needed. So let's have a look at some of those gifts. So empathy and kindness, looking after people, looking after animals, children, nature, you know. I mean, I'm of the, what else is there? You know, what else could be more important than that, you know, than nurturing and making sure people thrive, and also making sure, you know, that's why I say, you know, it's that balance, making sure we are thriving so that we can then help others to thrive. Then there's more thriving in the world. Like, what's not to like about that? Highly intuitive and attuned to unseen and hidden energies and emotions, right? So that means, you know, you're sometimes seeing behind the veil, someone's saying one thing, but you know something else is going on, you know? So then that's like, you know, again, truth seers, truth seekers. So we're able to see through, you know, a lot of nonsense sometimes, you know, when we're not projecting anyway. Psychics. So I'm sure there's a lot of psychics and healers. After all, we're doing this with the School of Intuition and Healing. So, you know, again, natural healers, natural psychics, natural, you know, clairvoyants, visionaries, good listeners, space holders. You know, shout out to all the therapists, the counselors, even those who are not counselors and therapists, but who people just will tell you their whole life story within 5 minutes. They're like, yeah, I'm going to tell you everything about me. And it's just, you know, because you're holding that energy that says, I'm not a judgmental, I'm a kind person, and I can hold that. I can hold your story. And sometimes, you know, they say, that's that saying, I can't remember who said it, that you know, the feeling of being heard is so close to being loved. Most people don't know the difference, that being heard, being seen is actually what makes people feel that's healing in and of itself, you know, when you're able to hold people's stories for them, and they get to feel witnessed and seen. It's you know, this is a gift. Understanding on others on a deeper level, you know, when you see that child doing that thing and someone else is calling it naughty, but you can see that actually what they need is just a little bit of attention, or maybe some words that they need to be spoken into them to help them actually blossom, you know. So again, just seeing behind the reasons why people do things. Again, this can come into negative when you are dealing with people who are very wounded, and empaths can be overly sympathetic with people that are wounded and who are creating harm. Yeah, so this is where we have to find the boundary, and, you know, find that balance between compassion and boundaries. And actually, on that note, sorry to go off on a tangent, but it was found, there was some research done, I don't know, I can't remember where this was, but it was some research done on people who are compassionate. And it was actually found that the people that were the most compassionate were the people that had the strongest boundaries. So, you know, often we think compassion is about just letting everyone do whatever they want. It's, you know, it's not actually, you know, when people are creating harm, we need to create boundaries, but we can still offer them compassion, you know, without co-signing that behavior. Good in nurturing roles, like Lorraine working in hospital or healthcare as a nurse. You know, most of us as empaths will be in some kind of caring role or nurturing role, or, you know, not always, but, you know, generally we lean towards that. Rich inner life. So, you know, lots of journaling, lots of dreaming, lots of imagination, you know, lots of kind of ideas about things and the world, and, you know, even philosophy and things like this, like just a very rich internal world, connection to the natural world. And again, this attunement, you know, I don't know if any of you, but like, I could talk to my plants. My plants would be able to tell me what they want, what they need, what they don't need. And I'd be able to, they'd be like, no, too much water, not enough water, need more light, or whatever. So again, that kind of attune. So even that, you know, we're in an environmental crisis. So, you know, the fact that, you know, we need more people who are attuned to the natural world, who can say, hey, this is what we need in order to heal the earth, and being very attuned and aware of that. Creatives, imaginative, you know, imaginative, like, you know, this is where, you know, the storytellers, the poets, the, you know, the singers, the artists, the musicians, the painters, those that can see beyond, you know, the veil, and who are able to draw out things that have deeper meanings, and other people feel that. So even if they're not an empath themselves, they see that and they can receive it. And then very spiritually open. So often, you know, very spiritually open with healing gifts, energetically healing gifts as well. Yeah. And yes, Cindy, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I wanted to just say, unbeknown to me, but always kind of been known as, like, she's the sensitive one. My sensitivity and hospitality was absolutely my superpower. I could anticipate the needs of customers. I could anticipate the needs of guests. I was great with staff because I could anticipate their needs. And I was great with management because of my intuition, being able to kind of, you know, and I really didn't know what it was. But it was also, you know, I always say I was really good at that because I'd been in a school environment where I was dyslexic and I really struggled. The minute I went into hospitality and I could read people and use my intuition in a environment, which you can't necessarily in the school system because, you know, I was in a normal academic school, which is a mistake in the first place. But the education system, and then all of a sudden I was like, I can use my intuition. I'm good at this. And so my sensitivity really became my superpower, even though I didn't, you know, I wouldn't have had this conversation with anyone. But it definitely does have superpower kind of, you know, avatar qualities that often we just miss completely.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a beautiful example of when, you know, when you're in your power, in your thriving, in your environment, where in an environment that supports your gifts, then, you know, like you say, it's a gift, it's a superpower. It's, you know, everything, it's like, you know, everything flows, it connects, it's really, really, you know, and I think this is why this course feels so important to me, because it's just about finding that right resonance, you know, and then the world opens up for empaths, you know.
Shaka, there's a really great question, and I'm curious to your answer to this great question from Pippa. Is there a difference to offering somebody empathy or compassion? Are they one in the same thing?
It's a really good question. That's a really good question. I guess, I mean, I don't know if this is a distinction, but I guess with empathy, I think of it more as like, if someone's going through a hard time, we have the capacity to be like, oh yeah, I know what, you know, I get that, you know, you don't have to walk in that person's shoes to really fully, you know, be able to, you know, understand what that might feel like. And so I think that's, for me, empathy, whereas compassion feels more broader. It feels like a broader, bigger container that's more around just human reality, existence itself, that there's a kind of, there's a container of compassion that says, hey, we're all just doing our best, you know, and, you know, just gives us a little bit of grace. more generally. I guess that's kind of, maybe if that was if I was going to make the distinction, maybe I would say that.
And for me, they're
great
both,
question, Pippa.
Yeah, great question. And just, Shaka, for me, they're both energy. They both sit in the heart space.
Yes.
And I think that is really important, that they're both heart energies and they flow. One of my life lessons is what is enabling and rescuing compassion and empathy. And that circle, when am I doing it indirectly for my shadow? And when am I actually doing it because it's open-hearted, it has no condition to it? And empathy and compassion for me all are not, they come without the exchange, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they're kind of just gifts that are given rather than it's relationally negotiated almost. Yeah. And I think that's what you say is that it's definitely the difference between boundaries and also the difference between being invited, you know, because I think there can be a rescuer energy for empaths, because you can see what people, but you can't help people if that's not what they want. And you have to let people have agency in their own lives and live the lives that they want and make their own choices. And then you make choices, because if you've got someone around you and they're making choices and they're hurtful or damaging to you, well, you get the choice to decide whether that's someone you have close to you. And therefore you're not, you know, you don't have to be bonded. That's why I say the codependency, where you're bonded with someone and feel that it's your obligation to get them to do something that they don't want to do or that you think is good for them. That's innate, you know, that's where we, you know, and so when you know that that's flowed, it's when that's received by someone, when someone invites that and says, yeah, I'm ready to receive that, like that advice or that guidance or that help or that care. But yeah, and that's another, I mean, we'll cover that in the course, because the empaths can have a tendency to do that, to seek out people that absolutely don't want care, and we want to care for them, because those are the people we think need the most care, and very invariably they often are. But actually that's where part of where the boundaries lie, where we just have to let those people find their way by themselves. And you know, and that's where we can be compassionate from a distance. We can hold them in compassion, hold them in love, pray that they find their way. But we have to say it's in God's hands. It's not for us as individuals to, again, carry the whole responsibility of that's where we can let go, you know. Yeah,
Just got an interesting insight. Empathy equals feelings, compassion equals emotions.
That's a very subtle difference, right? But yeah, I sense it, I feel it. I can't quite explain it, but you know, I feel that. Yeah. Nice.
Lovely.
Wonderful. So are we ready to
moving on?
Key tools. So now, you know, this is kind of really all right, key tools. So, you know, we've seen that, you know, obviously as empaths, we have our challenges, right? But this does not mean, like I said, this does not mean we cannot thrive in the world. And to thrive in the world as an empath is to have a deep understanding of yourself. So although we have this broad brush thing of empaths, we all have slightly different relationship to it. So it will be slightly unique for all of us. But, you know, on a whole, it's having a real deeper understanding of yourself and a capacity to meet yourself and a capacity to manage your energy, and do more of the things that give you energy, which counterbalance, you know, that giving, you know, that energy to give, that desire to give. Yeah. And so some of the things I'm going to just cover now. So just a caveat, some of this is kind of more general well-being, which I think, you know, anybody could take and actually, you know, would do well with. And then there's some things that are very, very specific for empaths that actually are the difference between, you know, doing okay and actually thriving. Yeah. So let's have a look, first of all, at these general things. So just general, you know, all of us could be doing this, but this is very important for empaths: time in nature. So this is time in space where unmediated time in nature, I would say. You know, talk to the trees, talk to the grass, talk to the sky, talk to the moon, talk to the sun, you know, talk to the stars. Let nature, like, have a direct like connection with nature. Yeah. And also I always say, like, trees are like clear the hard drive, you know, they're literally like, you have a lot going on. Trees are just like, hey, let me take that for you. Like literally, it's just, and then suddenly we're lighter, we're clearer. So definitely time in nature, time alone. I know it can be difficult for some people, especially if you've got young kids and families and things like that. But you've got to carve out that time alone, you know, whether it's a little walk in the park, whether it's that moment in the car before you have to go in the house, wherever it is, but find those moments where you can just be in your own thoughts, in your own space, in your own energy. Meditation, of course. This is very important because empaths are highly sensitive. Meditation is the difference between knowing, again, this is a really key important tool, knowing what's yours and what belongs to others. So it allows you to maintain your high sensitivity without, you know, without taking on things that aren't yours. You can start to become more aware. Creative outlets or pursuits, you know, whatever that may be, painting, you know, writing, whatever, cooking, you know, looking after plants, whatever that may be, but something that's kind of creative, that's not logical and structured, something that allows your mind to be like this, you know, to give your mind that flow state. And then looking after one's physical body, very important. I mean, it's very important for all of us, and whatever that might be. So that might be physical exercise, yoga or something like that. Obviously, I would recommend yoga, but anyway, not on the yoga hard sell tonight. But even just things like somatics, you know, the reason why we did the grounding exercise, this, you know, before we started, is because it's very important for empaths to get into the body. Yeah, because that's where all the emotions are. That's where we carry it all. So that's where we start to bring that awareness into the body. So anything to do with the physical body and more awareness around the physical body is always going to be very helpful.
Shaka, there's been a question. I think we you know, just to talk about from Numbele. I find myself taking over people's life for the lack of a better explanation. Sometimes when I think something that someone is doing is not right and might get them in trouble, I struggle to stop myself from taking over or interfering. How do I deal with this? I think it's a very good question.
Yeah, and I think this is related to that capacity to overtake on responsibility for other people's actions. And so there's something I would say, and we'll come on to it with the next slide, that might be some shadow aspect and shadow work to be working with there, because it's some kind of projection that's happening there. So the intention is good, but actually it's manifesting in a way that's challenging. And I think in those situations, that's something where there's some self-work that needs to be done, because there's something that's happening inside that's then being projected outside, when actually I think probably there's something that needs to be looked at within. And I mean, this is where, you know, when we talk about essentials, number 3 on this is shadow work. This is massive, because if empaths do not do their shadow work, then we end up in these situations where you think you're caring for others, but actually you're not. It's not coming from a place of care. It's coming from something else. And that could be different things. It might be to do with control. It might be to do with people pleasing. It might be a kind of fawn response, you know, like, and again, just knowing where that, when you know yourself, I mean, again, number 2, know yourself. Yeah. When you know what your wounds are, your specific wounds are, then you know how they can manifest and show up in relationships. And then then you can start to have more self-control over the way that you show up in relationships. These 2 are incredibly important, because what happens is, because empaths are known for being sensitive and kind and and all of these things, empaths can start to get in the ego mind around, we're helping other people, we're caring for other people, when actually there's some kind of shadow projection happening there. And then it's not care, it's actually something else. And that's where we really need to know, you know yourself, you have to do your shadow work and understand. Another thing for really important is one-on-one social time. So also remember, you know, we need companies, we need time alone, but we also need company. We're human beings, we are social beings. So you may notice that actually what suits you is more one-on-one time, you know. So you might have a group of friends. I definitely, this is true for me. I got a group of friends, but I don't see them all at once. I see them one at a time. So I can only manage, you know, and that for me is beautiful. I just get to be really intimate and deep and juicy with someone and just really get into nice conversation, and I get to like listen to them and hold space for them and vice versa. That feels very enriching for me, where rather than having, you know, frenetic conversations with many people which don't go deep, because I'm a deep person. I want to have deep conversations. So I really want to be with somebody, you know. So I think one-on-one social time is a really nice way to get connection, but without feeling socially overwhelmed, particularly if you find other people that are equally as sensitive and caring. These are beautiful, nurturing, life-giving relationships, very important for empaths as well. Boundaries, I think we've covered this. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. It's really important to protect your energy and know when to say no. And knowing when to say no is part of knowing yourself, the shadow work, you know, knowing what's yours and what's not. And gentle pursuits. So things with low stimulus. So things that, like, again, you know, you'd be told all your life, you're too sensitive, you're too sensitive. And you think to yourself, you know what? I would love nothing more than a bath with candles and lavender, and sit there, you know, with cool, quiet music. Do those things. Do those nice, quiet, gentle things that calms the nervous system. They're good for you. You know, you don't have to do the most all the time. Like, do the things that are gentle. Remind yourself, because empaths generally are naturally very gentle. So again, it helps you get into your own energy that nurtures, pours back into your cup when you're busy pouring into others. And then inner child work, which we kind of touched on when we talked about trauma, you know, because often empaths carry childhood trauma, or trauma in experiences. And again, this is what, you know, often actually trauma has, you know, can be a gift. It's like the wounded healer, right? It's like you have something that's happened to you and that actually helps you help others, you know, when it's looked at. But inner child work particularly, because empaths will often have, you know, some really difficult, challenging, you know, childhood stories. And so part of that healing, you know, it's very difficult to heal others when we're not doing that healing for ourselves. So it's really about speaking to that inner child, that child in you that still thinks they're too sensitive, they, you know, they give too much or not enough, or this, you know, all of the stories that come with, you know, the empath not feeling good enough, or not, you know, whatever that might be. And invariably they'll be found in childhood. And then, you know, so it's re-parenting that child, so that they can show up in the world as a sensitive, but that feels safe, in a way that feels safe, and received. And actually what I didn't put on this list, which I mentioned earlier, was resilience. You know, this is another thing. So, you know, empaths do have to build their capacity to be resilient in the world. Yeah. So there is something around that as well, to broadening that bandwidth for, you know, capacity to feel, you know, all of the feelings, the highs, the lows, the joy, the pain, that just building that muscle and that capacity to feel, because, you know, if you're an empath, you'll be feeling a lot of the time. And so, you know, you've got to find a way to filter and process and manage all of these emotions that are going to be chuddering through the body. And resilience helps you have a stronger and a bigger capacity for that, without, you know, having a crash, without, you know, having these adverse effects with that as well.
Okay, there's somebody who I just love this. I'm not sure who iPhone is. Maybe they can give us a name, but the Miracle Morning program includes all of these necessities that can be done every day. 6 things: silence, affirmation, visualization, exercise, reading, I think it's scribing, which is journaling. I do these savers every day. It's like energy drink for the soul. I love that.
Yeah, beautiful. And I mean, I think I would definitely put those in the general well-being category. Like, you know, these are things that anybody could do and will really do. You know, these are things that are human, healthy, you know, really get us in touch with, you know, things that matter and that can help us to thrive. But I think there is but there are very specific things for empaths. So yeah, that's beautiful. I like that. Yeah.
I love that. And then there's someone else that I think is also really goes succinct with empaths. I find myself being rather defensive rather than over caring, as it often becomes too much.
Yeah, so that's where the resentment builds, because what happens is empaths invariably overgive without telling people that they're, you know, and then there's an internal resentment where you're like, actually, you know, that's like, you know, and then someone, you know, then it could snap because someone goes, oh, you didn't do this and that. You think, well, I've done everything, and you've done things that no one's asked for, you know, and then you've overextended yourself, and then there's a kind of sense of like, yeah, resentment. And this is where, that's why it's important to manage one's energy. You know, that's our responsibility. You know, we have to take responsibility for that. Where are we overgiving? Where are we giving to people that don't receive and aren't able to make, you know, who don't want that for themselves, you know? And why are we trying to pour into them when they're not, you know, that we have to ask ourselves those questions. They're difficult because we have to start looking at parts of ourselves, which is, you know, could be really uncomfortable, but that's necessary.
Then I think somebody else, Jody, says breath work and learning to sit with one's own emotions also really helps, and helps reduce the sensitivity somewhat, which I think is great. Yeah.
Absolutely. The capacity to sit with all of the emotions is, yeah, you know, and the difficult ones as well as the, you know, the good ones is, yeah. Your capacity for feeling has to, you have to build that muscle, like you know, the bandwidth for it. Yeah. And that's like almost like training in a gym, you know, training that muscle, you know, just learning to do, you know, work through all the feeling states, all of them. Yeah. And, you know, and that's, you know, it's a personal story. You know, I spent much of my early adult life disassociated, without realizing it, you know, and that's why I say that's, for me, I've noticed like the embodiment, like feeling into my body has been the biggest gift, because it's been given me the capacity to feel what I'm feeling. Because what was happening is I was feeling so much, it was too overwhelming, and my body would just shut off. And then I had a disconnect. Then I don't know what's going on. I don't even know what's going on for me. I don't know what's going on for anyone else. I'm just not in touch with anything because it's just my body shut down, shut off. And so that ability to get into the body, feel into the states, feel into it, is then gives more flow. You know, the things come, they go, they come, they go, you know, and I think that's been my journey personally anyway. So yeah.
Great.
Okay, so last and final, just having a look at over the course, which is starting on the 10th of September. So for anyone that does want to join, I really hope that you will, and kind of giving us the capacity to go into a little bit more in depth with some of the stuff that we've looked at today. And so this is what the overall overview of the course will include. So some of the science around being an empath, some more on like the different kinds of empaths, a little bit of the history. I mean, there isn't much science, but there is some, and it's very interesting. And then again, energy transference, protection, you know, boundaries, you know, some of the questions that have come up today, you know, what's mine, what's yours, you know, when you're holding stuff. And I don't know if you felt this, but there's definitely been times when I've had a social interaction, I've walked away and I've thought or felt something, and I've thought, I didn't feel that before. And I'm like, It's not mine. That was deposited into me by somebody else. Once I know that, I lift, it goes. And I'm like, oh yeah, cool. Now I'm back to me now. But I know when things are being deposited into me by other people, and often unconsciously projected. So again, being able to identify your own emotional states so that you can then identify the states of others and states that have been projected onto you. Again, the hero's journey, looking at the shadow, the underbelly of the empath. Yeah, you know, it's not all love and light. There is a dark shadow there as well. But looking at that through the lens of the hero's journey, how do we move through that and come out the other end with the gifts, with the lessons, with the amulets, you know? And then vulnerability and power, again, we've touched on this. You know, vulnerability is seen as a weakness. You know, in this society, in this world, it's, you know, it's seen as something that is equated to weakness. So how can we start to think about vulnerability as a power, as a superpower, as something that actually, you know, is a gift in the world? So again, how to alchemize that? How do we use that and build power? Different kind of power, yeah. I always say, remembering the strength card in the tarot, you know, it's not someone beating and punching the lights out of someone, is it? No, it's a soft maiden gently stroking the head of a lion. So this tells us something about what strength is, spiritual strength. Yeah, it's different kind of strength to the strength that we understand normally. And then mythology, new paradigm. So this is where we do get a little bit, not political, but, you know, where we start to think about stories and mythology and myth, and how we start to understand the world, ourselves, our own stories, our purpose. And again, it gives us a different orientation. It gives us a new perspective, a new way of seeing things. And then we can orient ourselves in different ways, and also connecting us to a deeper heart and truth, you know, about our purpose in the world, that's maybe a little bit more magical, a little bit more imaginative than, you know, hey, you know, go to school, get a job, get married, get a pension and die. You know, it gives us a little bit more of that, what, you know, like actually there's more purpose to life than that. And mythology can give us access to that. And then archetypes, which is a juicy one, I have to say. Archetypes, you know, both their negatives and their positives. Yeah. So we can start, archetypes can either have us or we can have archetypes. And so again, once we're aware of archetypes, how they start to play in our lives, and again, we can start to take more control. We're not just embodying archetypes unconsciously. We can start to be more conscious about how they're showing up in our lives, and also how dynamics put us in archetypes, you know, because often these are relational dynamics, and then we end up taking up roles, and just having, again, just understanding of that. And then again, that just gives us more awareness and gives us more power. And then too much, not enough, imposter syndrome. You know, empaths, you know, sometimes never get it right. Not enough, too much. Not enough, too much. Too sensitive, not enough. You know, and so how can we build more confidence? How can we be more authentic? How can we build our self-esteem? You know, so that we can start to overcome that and show up in the world and not be afraid to show up as ourselves and our true selves. And then last and finally, as most of us know, the empath and the narcissist dynamic. Very interesting dynamic. It's, you know, it's sometimes depicted as, you know, the good and the bad. You know, it's not that. They're both sides of the same coin. And actually, if any one of you have had a relationship with, you know, I'm not a fan of labels, but in all intents and purposes, you know, a narcissist, you know, we're not diagnosing people here, but maybe someone who's, maybe we want to say someone who's got narcissistic traits. They have, those relationships actually are the biggest learning ground for empaths. This is where actually you can really earn your stripes and really come into your power. And actually there's a lot of mirroring that happens in the dynamic between the empath and the narcissist that can actually help an empath to grow. So we'll look a little bit more at that. And so that's the whole course. So if that sounds, you know, interesting to you, I really hope at least some of you will consider joining. Yeah, because like I said, it's something I'm really passionate about and really excited to share in more detail.
Shaka, this has been invaluable information. It's been really good for me because we bang on about energy management a lot of the time and whatever. This is different. This is kind of, this is different. There are ways of addressing different things with somebody who's highly sensitive or an empath, along with the grounding, the protection. But this goes deeper. This goes into what's catching the ball. Why am I porous? Why am I that? And I really think it's brought out some really interesting and good ideas. Yeah.
And also, just to say, the classes will each include practical. So it's not just all theory based. There will be practical exercises, practical things. So, you know, embodiment techniques, journaling techniques. So there'll also be lots of practicals as well to help actually, you know, actualize this. It's not just theory. Yeah.
Brilliant. Any more questions? I think if there are no more questions, Shaka, it's been amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your journey, bringing these fascinating new conversations, new inquiries, new ideas around the work we need to do to show up in the world and make our empathy a superpower and really show up in a place where we feel comfortable. Thank you, everyone, for joining, for playing full out, for asking good questions, for listening to us and our voices, because it's always nice when people show up and do that. Shaka and I are great talkers. And yeah, some beautiful comments. Thank you, one and all. Please enjoy your evening. Please enjoy your weekend. Please take time in nature. Please use some of these tools that have come to light tonight, and just manage that a little bit better for yourself. Thank you, everybody. That was really a lovely evening, and we look forward to seeing you at the school very soon. And as I say, reach out to Shaka or reach out to us, and if you want to book, and there will be a recording sent out if you want to go through and make some further notes. Good night,
And there's
everybody.
Also, just to remind everybody, so Cindy, just to remind everyone, there is also the discount. So that's available until midnight tomorrow. So if you do want to book on the course, there's a little deal and a little
So it's £15 discount for those who are international and 150 Rand for those who are based in Southern Africa. I think there's somebody there from Zambia, so somebody from Southern Africa. And if you know, and reach out to us if you need to. And thank you all so much. And we are excited to see you at the school soon. And I feel like I need to do this course, I have to say, because it's new at the school. It's going to make its first
debut.
Debut. That's the word I'm looking. Shaka, any last leaving thoughts for the group before we close off?
Just thank you so much for joining, and just look after yourselves and look after those around you. And just know your care, your sensitivity is a superpower, and just look after yourselves. Okay,
take care. Good night, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much, everyone.